I found this piece originally in Vanity Fair, which was a synthesis of the book, and then eventually the book became available to Hollywood. When I learned of the story of John and Alicia Nash, I grabbed it immediately and paid and begged and ended up getting it. Ron wasn't available to make the movie at the time, but was always very interested in the subject and particularly the Nash story. Many A directors were calling and wanting to get together and said they had, point of view on the piece. I even focused on a particular director, but it turned out that this director was available to make the movie exactly when Ron was available. So I get to choose. So I chose Ron Howard. He agreed that he would absolutely make the movie and that he wouldn't turn back and that he loved it. And I said, how much do you love it? And he said he would pledge his commitment. And as friends and partners, it was kind of fun to sort of test each other creatively. Once Ron gets involved, really involved in making a movie, and we talk about sort of how we see the movie and its style, Ron will test me along the way, not as a pop quiz, but as a test to sort of, I think, to see whether his vision is being adhered to. So he'll ask questions about the dailies, or he'll ask questions about a performance a little bit, or are we going in the right direction?
I decided to direct it, you believed in it enough to produce it. Are we actually getting it? Or if I've drifted off in some direction, or if I become too myopic, or if I made too many compromises, or all the things that can erode sort of the vision or what needs to be done to make a story really take off and work.
Essentially, we would be able to reduce this idea, this book, this piece, into a sentence or two. If one were to draw a vertical line from that sentence down to the end, we try to follow that vertical line as closely as possible within the format of the collaboration of a film. So Ron will find questions and ideas that are curious to him day in and day out, and we talk about those questions.
One of the other things that is great about the collaboration, where Brian provides to me a kind of a creative safety net. Brian has broad instincts that he trusts. I don't mean broad like a zany broad. I mean in terms of the arcs and shapes and understanding the emotion, the intellectual intent, and the big thematic values in a story. One of the things that I really rely on Brian a lot for is to also touch base and say, how are we doing in terms of the big picture, the grand scheme of things? I get fascinated by all the details, the nuances of performance, the visual possibilities, and just all the mechanics of making the movie. The most important ideas are those big ideas. And it's really great that Brian, in fact, has a little distance. Brian doesn't come to the set every day when I'm directing a movie. He's running Imagine. He comes every so often, but that's kind of good.
Okay, action!
I go every day on movies that need it more.
Well, okay, but for me, it works out really well because Brian does keep just enough objectivity that he's still sort of that first most important audience member, in a way. An audience member who had like great anticipation for what the movie could be, which in a way is the toughest audience member. And that's another just sort of virtue in the relationship as it's developed over the years.
Creatively, we end up at the same place. Qualitatively, which is sort of in that same category, we end up at the same place. And our value system and work ethic is largely similar. But the way we get there is almost entirely different, down to just the big base components of the fact that Ron lives on the East Coast and I live on the West Coast. That forces my discipline to, think about, how to manage the logistics of a thing.
But it also does start with identifying ideas. And I mean, going back to the beginning of our partnership, Night Shift was Brian's idea, Splash was Brian's idea, and Brian chased down A Beautiful Mind, and he believed in it, identified that and catalyzed it, made it go. We've found over the years that when we sort of agree on something, generally that becomes, a pretty strong bet, a pretty strong choice. When there's a difference, when sometimes one or the other of us can be right or wrong, but when we happen to line up, you can really almost put that one away and kind of count on it.